We are recording. We are recording. We are recording.
County Board meeting. Would you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First thing on the agenda is open forum. John Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm here as Brainerd Public Schools archivist. And in that capacity, I remind you that Crow Wing County started as a county in 1857. Statehood came in 1858. And you organized in 1870. School district started at the very end of 1872, so we're contemporaneous with you. We're celebrating our 150th year of operations this year. And as part of that, at homecoming this year, we have a pickup choir that will be performing in the Guichet Zibe. Pickup choir means you come as you are. If you wish to sing, you get to sing on the stage. And I'm here today to invite each. Sing is singing. I saw that smile, Commissioner. Certain people say they can't sing, and it doesn't matter, because other people will sing for you. There will be a lot of people on that stage. We'd like to see the stage filled with people from all walks of life, all persuasions. Here. They don't have to be graduates. They don't have to be residents. We just like to bring them together, and we're calling it the Coming Home Concert. So particularly, I'd like to see leadership from municipalities and the county be present. And if you are, I know one of you was in a choir some years ago. I'm pretty sure that I'm right about that, Commissioner.
I got thrown out, John.
Well, that might have been
They wanted me to hold a tune and I couldn't.
for other reasons, maybe. But I would, seriously, I am here to extend that invitation to you, to the public behind me, and to the public who is listening and viewing this online as well. Everyone is welcome. The concert does not cost anything. It's a free will offering. There are 1,200 seats. There's lots of room on stage. Contact me, Brainerd Public Schools archivist, and I will get you signed up. I'm looking for you. Thank you.
And John, I was in the choir and didn't get thrown out.
Well, there's a reason for that then.
But I will be selling tickets that evening, as you know.
Not on the Saturday.
Oh, okay.
It's a
It's
Saturday.
not on the night of the homecoming
It's
game.
a
then.
Saturday. We haven't set the time yet. Brian Stubbs, the choir director, and I are working together on this. We have not yet set the time. It just will be on Saturday, probably late afternoon or evening would be my best guess. We will have multiple conductors, and I'm glad you asked me that question, Madam Chair. One of the conductors is Craig Arnold, who is a graduate and has conducted choirs all over the world, and now runs something called Manhattan Chorale Productions, which take a look at the website. It's really quite incredible. So we'll look for you.
Well, thank you
Thank
very,
you.
very much.
Thank you, John.
Keep us informed. Okay. Review and approval of the minutes from June 27th.
Madam Chair, I'll make the motion to approve the regular county board meeting minutes from 6/27/73.
Do I have a second?
I will second that.
Motion by Commissioner Barrows, second by Commissioner Lubke. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Review and approval of today's agenda. Are there any changes?
No.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Move the approval.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Hoag, second by Commissioner Coring. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda.
Madam Chair, I just have a question. You know, I think all of you know I'm a little hesitant on letters of support because I think when the county board gives a letter of support, we're lending the support of all 68,000 people in the county. And so I see that there must be a letter of support under 511 Nisswa Trail Program Application Funding Support. So can somebody just explain to me what that is? I don't know, who would explain that?
Madam Chair, Jenny Max is online also, if you want to speak with her. And then Tim Bray is also in on this, so whoever you want to talk to first.
Well, somebody's on there now.
That's Jenny. Which of the two of you would like to go first?
Dueling. I'll maybe just introduce it real quick. The city administrator for the city of Nisswa, Jenny Max, is also online and has joined us today. This letter of support is for another application for funding to continue on the Gull Lake Trail. This has been a local effort with municipalities in Crow Wing County and also Cass County to continue the trail around Gull Lake. There was a shortfall this year when they went to bid the project. And they're going back to, I believe it's the legacy funding at the state to apply competitively for the additional funds to make the connection that was unable to be built this year. That section, it partially lies within Crow Wing County. And so that's maybe teeing it up a little bit, and Administrator Jenny Max could maybe expand on that.
Certainly. Good morning. Board of Commissioners, thank you, Tim, for just the highlight of that. This is essentially just a reaffirmation of the support that the city received from Crow Wing County about 3 years ago when we first applied to the Legacy Fund for the trail funding that we needed in partnership with the city of Lakeshore. And as Tim mentioned, when the costs the bids were let this spring, we didn't have enough money to construct the entire trail. And so we modified what we could complete for this year. And we're going back to seek a final segment of funding. And this is just to reaffirm, I think the Legacy Fund application just requires that the county continue to make sure you're on board and you're informed about what we're doing. And hopefully there's no concerns, there's no change to the plan design. And we are just looking for a reaffirmation of your support for our project. Thank you. Happy to answer questions.
Madam Chair, I don't have any questions. I believe I can support that.
Would you like to make a motion?
I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Coring, second by Commissioner Barrows. Is there any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Community service.
We have Jenny on the line. I think congratulations would be in order. I believe that Jenny just got elected to be president of the Minnesota League of Cities.
Congratulations.
So congratulations to Jenny.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ought to keep you out of trouble, shouldn't it? You'll serve well. Thank you for serving.
Okay, community services.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I probably could have just gone to the podium, but I'll come to the chair here. Tammy Loic, Adult Services Manager at Community Services. So today, what I'm bringing before you is a determination of need application to expand day services or to develop. These are required by the state that I bring these before the county board whenever we have a change or a development such as this. And I think, just as reference, we had Cummings over in the Crosby area that I had brought to you within the last year, where we approved 4. We were adding to their capacity. And then recently I brought Productive Alternatives Change in Address to you, and it was on this same application form. This is a new development. CC Cares Adult Day and Senior Services would be in the Pequot Lakes area. They are looking to provide day service to 20, potentially up to 20 individuals, 55 years of age until death. And they have put this forward. They are working through the licensing process, but this is a piece of what they need to do to get to that place. You know, I think why I'm bringing it before you and asking for your approval is that we don't have a lot of these resources throughout our county, and so seeing this in the Pequot Lakes community, I believe, is a good thing for seniors that live in that area, rather than coming here to Brainerd. We have a couple of these programs in Brainerd, and then the one program over in the Crosby area. Any questions?
Madam Chair, a couple questions. So, Tammy, I'm assuming that from what you just said, that this requires that the county board weigh in on this application, correct?
So what DHS is looking for is that we see a need.
A need.
Yep.
And so Madam Chair, another question. So Tammy, then I would assume that your department bringing this forward feels like there is a need and the staff over there is supportive of this application, correct?
Correct. We believe that there's a need to have this service being offered. Like I said, I think it's really helpful to our community members when we can offer these resources. We already have a lot of limited resources when it comes to supporting individuals in the community, allowing them to stay in their homes, and this is one of those resources that an individual could go to during the day. And it's being offered in the northern part of our county, which we currently are very limited in that area for this type of service.
So Madam Chair, just another question. So Tammy, let's say and this is kind of hypothetical, and if you don't want to answer it, that's fine, but what if somebody else comes forward in 3 months and has an application? I just want to be concerned that the county board isn't picking and choosing winners. I mean, every application would be forwarded to the county board, is that correct?
Yep.
Because I believe there's a service in Pequot, isn't there?
Senior Class Care does have a day program. We do not have very many individuals. We've been in contact with them to ask about that, and the program is being run at very minimal. So I believe they have capacity for 30, but they're currently not serving that many people. I went on their website as well just to see what they're doing in reference to their programming, because our staff are indicating that we don't have very many individuals participating in that program. And they're not advertising that program, so I don't know if that's a staffing shortage there that they're dealing with. But they have been approved to have a day program, and they've worked through the licensing for that.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Okay, Tammy, I have a question too. I know this is for a determination of need. Now, you've just said that this other program isn't to capacity. But also, we have Breath of Life in Brainerd, and they have current openings, so
Yep.
I want to make sure there's a need for this, because I don't want to push someone else out of business,
Yep.
by putting another person in.
Yeah.
So if,
Yep.
it's your
Madam Chair,
determination.
yeah. I think, again, as I said, we do know that people in our county do have transportation issues. Breath of Life, I do believe, provides some transportation for individuals. And so, that is an option. But again, I just look at the idea of having these programs being offered in the outside areas of our county. So.
Okay. Any more questions?
Madam Chair, I might just make a point, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Tammy, but we're looking at the northern part of the county, so the one located here really primarily serves the Brainerd-Baxter area, I would assume. The other one that's currently up in Pequot, there seems to be a communication gap there with that program and not understanding really what they're doing, how aggressive they're trying to be in running their program. So what I'm looking at from my perspective is that I see a need for a provider that's going to actually provide the service, not just in name only in a piece of paper that comes from DHS, but that will actually get out there and encourage 55 and older individuals to come to their program. But it serves a greater area than just the Pequot, or are they located in Pequot, I'm assuming?
Jenkins.
Jenkins.
Yeah.
So it's really the 50 Lakes area, it's the Emily area potentially, it's Ideal Corners up there. So it really serves a bigger geographic area than just Jenkins, is what I'm looking at. So I think this is an opportunity. I won't say good or bad, but it's an opportunity to, and I think there's a need up there. So personally, I would support this at this point.
It's in your district, John? What's your
Oh,
wishes?
sure. I'll make a motion that we offer a letter of support from the county for the, what does she have it under as a, I got it here.
CC Cares.
CC Cares Adult Day and Senior Service by Cassie Carey up in Pequot. It says Pequot Lakes, but it's actually, the location is actually in Jenkins. So,
Madam Chair, if I might add, and then authorizing Ms. Lewick to sign the
oh, okay.
The
letter.
application of need.
Madam
Yeah.
Chair, is it the motion on the screen?
Yeah, it's a
Thank you.
determination need application.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Second.
Thank you.
Motion by Commissioner Lubke, second by Commissioner Coring. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Land Services.
Good morning. The first item we have on the agenda this morning is an EAW determination for the Anderson Commercial Storage Building Development north of Brainerd. Before I get into the specifics, I just wanted to give a quick summary about what the environmental assessment worksheet process is and maybe what it isn't, so that we're all clear as to what the expectations and requirements are. So, the environmental assessment worksheet is a brief document designed to lay out the basic facts of a project necessary to determine if an environmental impact statement is required for the proposed project. In addition to the legal purpose of the AEW in determining the need for an EIS, the AEW also provides permanent information, informs the public about the project, and helps identify ways to protect the environment. The AEW is not meant to approve or deny a project, but instead act as a source of information to guide other approvals and permitting decisions. The AEW is completed by the Responsible Government Unit according to Minnesota Rules 4410. And the Responsible Government Unit for this application is Crow Wing County. And what I think, Tim, if you could put I think we have a map on the document.
The doc, yeah.
And so what we have is an EAW request, or EAW that has been completed for located on parcel number 99140723. It's the area here highlighted in that blue box. It is north of Brainerd, west of Highway 371. It's located on the old drive-in movie theater property. It's located also on Hartley Lake, there to the south, which is a recreational development lake. The property itself is 16.5 acres in size. The proposal for the property is to build 71 storage units, a clubhouse, and a wash bay. Just to provide a little bit of history and background on maybe how we got to where we're at today with this project. The first part I want to point out is that the project is located in the Commercial 2 Land Use District, and in that district, storage buildings are a permitted use. I also want to point out that the second item we have on the agenda today after this is for an ordinance update to change storage buildings from a permitted use to a conditional use in the Commercial 1 and Commercial 2 district. And if that is approved, would have an impact on this request itself. We have issued permits for 10 buildings on the property. They were issued, let's see here, I got the numbers here. back on October 4th of 2022 and October 17th. And so some of those buildings have been built, some are in the process of being built now. It was determined this spring that an EAW was needed because of the scope and size of the request. And so that basically put a timeout on any new permits being issued for the parcel. There was a comment period on this that went in place from June 3rd to July 5th. There were a total of 8 comments received, but I just want to be very transparent about this. We did receive 7 comments that came in during the actual time period itself by June 5th. We did receive a comment from the State Historical Preservation Office on June 6th. That came about 4:30 in the afternoon, and it was after I had submitted the packet to the county board for today's meeting. And their recommendation at that point was to complete a phase 1 archaeological study on the parcel, more of like a desktop review to see if there's been any research or history done on that property. I then responded back to their office and had a discussion and gave some more of the facts of the situation, explained kind of where we're at with this, and it's based on the information that it was the old movie theater, and there was disturbance back then to make the theater, the area to be able to park in that, and then based on the construction permits that have been issued and the road that's already been put in out there, we did get verification yesterday afternoon from the Preservation Office that they no longer require that archaeological study to be done. And so if that had been the case, I would have come to you today to postpone the meeting, but based on that feedback, we were able to proceed with what we have before us today.
Madam Chair, before Chris moves on, may I ask a question?
Of course.
Who is the State Preservation Office? Never heard of it. Why are they weighing in?
It's basically the state archaeologist and their office. And so as part of an EAW, they provide notification of any EAW across the state and provide the opportunity to provide feedback. So that's one of the roles of when you file the environmental assessment worksheet and put it out for public comment, that they get an opportunity to comment as well.
I don't know that, have they ever weighed in before? I've never heard that.
I have not had them weigh in on an EAW in the past. I have had interactions with them on a couple different projects we've had, particularly down south part of the county with a land subdivision where there's concerns about there being some potential Indian burial ground type situations that we had to investigate. That was back when I was with the county the first time, probably, 10, 12 years ago, I suppose. But since then, I haven't had any interactions with them.
So, Madam Chair, so being that there's an application, then they're notified, and that's how they knew?
Correct. Yep. Excuse me. If we could go maybe to the resolution that's in the packet. So there's a resolution in your packet that basically states with findings that the EAW that has been presented and out for comment is adequate, and that an environmental impact statement would not be required. If this determination of this resolution is approved today, the next steps for Mr. Anderson and his project would be to apply for and provided that the ordinance gets amended as our next step, would be to apply for a conditional use permit and a plat. The cutoff date for that application to get on the August meeting would be tomorrow. I have been working with their surveyor, and they have all the information that they need. So I do expect them to submit that the application for the plat and the CUP by either today or tomorrow to get to the August meeting. And then based on the recommendations from the Planning Commission for the plat, and if the CUP were to get approved, then you could see a preliminary plat coming for your review possibly at the September meeting. That's kind of the time frame that we're in right now. So the resolution that I have that is in your packet is a recommendation from staff to approve as that has been submitted. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions?
So just for clarification, Chris, right now this only pertains to the permits that have been, or the property as it sits currently, not any new permits or anything, just the 10 buildings that are...
No, this applies to the
Nothing to do with
proposed
that.
overall complete process that they're proposing of the 71 units. So that, this EAW is based on that information.
Okay, so we're only talking the EAW at this point?
Correct, this is not regarding to any permits or anything being approved or denied. This process is meant to inform the permitting process as we move forward and provide more information as far as potential conditions to be implemented to, prevent any environmental impacts as part of the development.
Okay.
Madam Chair, when that plat originally came to the county, or when that development first came to the county, wasn't a EAW needed at that time?
The answer to that would be yes, but I think the analysis that was done at the time looked at the rule incorrectly. And so when I was able to come in and take another fresh eyes look at it, it was determined at that point that the EAW was needed. So it should have been required from the beginning, but just because we didn't pick it up at the beginning doesn't mean that we don't, process that as we come aware of it. So, yeah.
So if it originally would have come in, it would have come in with an EAW originally?
It should
When
have.
it originally would have
Correct.
come in?
Before, it should have had
This is just
the
catching
EAW
up
should
on
have
it.
been done before there were any permits were issued and
Okay.
that correctly. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, this is a pretty big development in my district, so I'm going to ask if there's anyone in the audience who hasn't commented, because we have all the comments that were sent in our packet, so we know. But is there anyone who hasn't commented who would like to make a comment? Hearing none?
Madam Chair, could I ask you to just kind of, I'm not understanding this quite fully, what we're getting ready to do.
I'll give it a shot, but Chris, please correct me when I'm wrong. An environmental assessment worksheet is a sort of pre-document looking at what are the environmental impacts. If you think that there is a obvious cause for an environmental impact, there's a more intensive document called an environmental impact statement. That's really intensive. And you'll tend to see that for like a manufacturing facility, something that's going to...
Building target field,
Yeah,
new
something-
airport expansion.
Yep.
Very, very large.
Very, very
projects.
large. This one is really to inform the process. Are there significant environmental impacts proposed as part of this development that we ought to take a closer look at? If so, I think it begs the question, what are they? So far, staff has looked at them and said, we don't think they reach the threshold. You don't have to agree with that. We would want some feedback from you about what are the impacts you're concerned about. So right now, what's in your packet is to declare that the environmental impacts on this development are not so significant that we can't deal with it through the conditional use process.
Exactly.
If they were so significant that you said we need to do a more full-blown EAW, it will pause the project and require the developer to document more information about what the environmental impacts are.
Correct. And what's before you, Commissioner Coring, is to say that the EAW has been presented, provides the information we need to proceed with permitting and going through this project. And it basically says that we do not need the environmental impact statement, as Tim mentioned. That's what's before you today.
Perfect. I would move the request for board action on this.
Is there a second?
That's in our packet.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Coring, second by Commissioner Hoag. Is there any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much. The second item we have on the agenda today is to take a look at the land use ordinance. And if we could scroll down to Article 10, it's probably going to be a few pages in. So at the Planning Commission had a public hearing back at their meeting in June, it would have been on June 15th, and they made a recommendation to the county board to amend the land use ordinance. Yep, right there.
This one?
Yep, go up, no, down one, I guess, I'm sorry, wrong direction.
This one?
One more down. And should be under the commercial section, I'm sorry. Let's scroll one more.
Am I supposed to be going up or down?
Yeah, you need to go down. I'm sorry. Okay, hold on. Oh, right there. Oh, back one where it got yellow. Up one more.
Where the yellow was?
Yep, right there.
Okay.
Stop. We're there. Good job. There's only 230 pages to sift through, right? So
Right.
I mean, it's not much to really work through, but, and so at the meeting on the 15th of June, the Planning Commission made a recommendation after a public hearing to change and amend the ordinance for these storage buildings, commercial and the commercial 1 and the commercial 2 district from a permitted use to a conditional use. There were no public comments received at the hearing either from the public. And this makes sense as far as wanting to have a more robust process and ability for the public to weigh in on these types of uses within the county. We're seeing a different type of use with these than we have maybe in previous years, where it was more along the lines of building the longer type buildings. We're just gonna rent and very, very minimal use, whereas now we're seeing more developed in more of a planning, development, conservation design with individual lots being sold off and that. And I think based on that, it makes more sense to have a more robust and public feedback on that process before it gets approved and permits are issued to begin the construction. So based on the Planning Commission feedback and staff recommendation, it's recommended to approve the amendment as submitted.
Madam Chair, if I might ask a question. Chris, do you think this will address the issue where a developer goes in and starts to clear out? You know, we've had some issues with how much was cleared next to the shoreline.
Yep.
Is this going to solve that problem
Well, this.
as best as possible?
Our ordinance regulates any sort of vegetation removal on a lake within the building setback, so within 100 foot of the lake. And so our ordinance still would still handles that situation regardless if there's a CUP required or not. And so any sort of activities down there would require, compliance with the ordinance. And so, there were some activities completed out there, before I started. Soil and Water was out there, and everything has got a restoration order. Everything is going to be, everything's out there's going to be fine as far as that side of the lakeshore piece. What the conditional use permit can do is put in condition that say, we think more screening is needed on the property, so we think there should be some more trees planted here and there to help screen things. So that is how the CUP can assist in that type of thing, is by requiring a certain screening in certain areas to help offset viewscapes and how people might see the property from the lake and that.
So I think one of the big concerns by some of the residents around the lake is that developers start to see that they're going to be approved, so they go in and they start doing some initial grubbing and that, and they take out whatever they don't like, but it isn't necessarily following the 100-foot setback, and
Right.
Once you take it out, it's gone. And what do we do? And I know we can condition things back in place, and it'll take time. It'll take a couple years to really get that feel back that you took out, or they took out. So that's my concern, is that some of these developers get anxious and they want to get going on it because they got money invested, but
Right. And I think the key to remember too is that we have different requirements when you're within the shoreline district around the lake versus outside the lake. So if you're around the shoreline district, to do any sort of dirt moving activities would require a permit. So like if it's like, say, outside of that building setback, if they want to do some clearing and grubbing and they would be limited to 100 cubic yards with a permit, and then anything above that would be a conditional use permit in addition to that. So you're pretty limited to how much site prep you can do before. And so the idea is that, obviously we want that CUP process to be in place before a lot of activity happens on the site, so that we get a better picture of what's going to happen before work commences on the site. And this CUP process will help with that.
okay, thank you.
So that's what I'm saying, or questioning. This will make a difference in the fact that the county commissioners will hear about it before. Right now, there's buildings going up and they have gotten an over-the-counter permit and we don't know anything about the project. And so I want to make sure that we know what's going on before we have all the underbrush cut and cleared from the lake, so.
Well, and the underbrush and any sort of vegetation removal is, regardless if it's a commercial use or residential use, the standards are still the same. And so, however that played out and come together the CUP wouldn't have had anything really to do with that part of it, because that's just, again, going along and doing shoreline activity. As long as you're compliant with our ordinance, you can get a permit to do those activities. If you are not compliant with the ordinance, then we provide enforcement and then go out and make that site to get restored and brought back to what would be, compliance with the ordinance. It's important to remember too, with this process, the CUP, is that the authority for approving a conditional use permit has been delegated to the Planning Commission Board of Adjustment. And so you're aware of the process, but the county board doesn't have any, has taken its authority away from itself to get that to the Planning Commission to make the decisions on a conditional use permit. And any appeals of that would go to the Court of Appeals, and there's not an appeal process to come to the county board for conditional use permits.
So Madam Chair, so question, Chris. So right now, in commercial 1 and commercial 2, let's say a hypothetical, let's say I owned a lot and it's commercial 1 or commercial 2. Right now, I can come in and get a permit to build some storage units over the counter.
Correct.
And so this change I can still come in and apply for a permit, but it's a conditional use permit?
Correct.
That doesn't make any sense to me. Why would we even have commercial? What other commercial 1 and commercial 2? So what can be built on there where they can have an over-the-counter permit? What other?
Well, we can look up here at our land use tables, and if you see in that column where it says commercial 1 and commercial 2,
Yep.
and you come down, it tells you, so things that are permitted in the commercial 1 and 2 would be an on-site sign, a vehicle, boat, recreational equipment sales, a commercial retail business, office, business or professional, liquor on sale, off sale. Those are all permitted activities that would not require a conditional use permit.
Would not require?
Would not.
What about a motel?
That we have down as a conditional use permit. So we still have activities like for an event center, a hotel, motel, a off-premise sign is a condition. So there are some still conditional use permits that are in the commercial district that we think makes sense to have more feedback from the neighborhood before that would get to, be approved. So that's the purpose of a conditional use permit, is just to basically notify the neighbors in the area and to get feedback as far as, is there something about that parcel that maybe we don't know about, that the neighborhood knows about, to provide some more feedback to inform the decision.
I guess I don't quite, Madam Chair, understand what, all of a sudden, somebody's got a problem with storage units, but storage units, if you go around and try to rent a storage unit, they're literally full.
Mm-hmm.
They're full, and there's a need. We just talked about a need for adult daycare services. There's a need, and now seem like we're putting the squeeze on them because somebody doesn't like storage units. I don't know. It just doesn't, for this old farm boy, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I think one point of clarification might be that maybe not all commercial 1 and commercial 2 properties are created equally. I think if you're talking commercial 1 or commercial 2 that aren't within 1,000 feet of a lake, might be a little different than ones that are. And I think so this one, I think, is a little bit more sensitive because of its location and proximity to Hartley Lake. I think if this was maybe a commercial 2 property that was, not near a lake or anything along those lines, I think it might, that would be probably a different story. And so I think as we move forward with the ordinance revision, we might need to flesh it out a little bit more as far as, is there a commercial 1, commercial 2 difference between within 1,000 feet of a lake and not within 1,000? That might be something we need to flesh out more. But for right now, I think it makes sense to have that conditional use permit within that commercial 1 and 2, because like you had mentioned, there obviously is a need for storage buildings. Otherwise, people wouldn't be coming to town and buying property and building them. There are just certain, the storage buildings use that we're seeing has changed from what it was when I was here the first time, where it was basically just rentals. We're now changing it to individual lots where people are owning them, and they're getting to be much larger in size and density. That's, I think, the difference between maybe what it was 5 to 10 years ago versus what we're seeing within the last 5-6 years.
Gary?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Coring, Chris just touched on it a little bit, but this is the second or third storage unit development that the neighborhood has been very frustrated in that they see these buildings go up, and when they have an official time to voice concern through like a public hearing process, it's when the plat comes through. But the buildings are already built. So the idea here is if a developer really is going to have 71 individual buildings, or not all individual buildings in this case, but most of them will be, that we let the neighborhoods or the folks comment on what they believe is right, wrong, going to impact the environment, and they don't sit here for months seeing development go on and going, we aren't told anything, as we don't send out official notices on over-the-counter permits, and that we are seeking feedback so that they are more involved, even though there is a process that we would follow, is one of the things we're just trying to address. It just seems a little clunky in these situations. So if somebody came in on this property and said, I just want to build a 40 by 80 shed, I don't think nobody would have said anything about that, even though now it would be a conditional use. It's more of when the developer for sure knows they're going to build all these buildings and turn around and individually sell them. That's where we've seen the problem with the public, feel like that they're excluded from the process. So we're just trying to figure out how to help that.
Madam Chair, but what this does is we're not just talking about one project, we're talking about the entire county.
That's correct.
And if I look at 371 from Baxter to Nisswa, eventually all that's going to be, that makes sense for commercial to be all the way along there. So somebody's hollering, I don't want these units here. Well, what do they want there then? That's where the corridor of commercial needs to be, right there. So I don't know, I just think I almost feel like we go back to what I've said is property rights. I don't know. I guess when I make a decision here, yes, I gather input, but I don't put my finger in the air to see which way the wind is blowing and I got 100 comments because somebody doesn't want it. I know that old trick because it's funny when somebody in spring comes, somebody comes and their neighbor's doing something wrong. They don't want nothing to do with the county, but then when spring comes and they see something, then they use the county as a weapon against their neighbor. And it just, I don't know. It just, I don't know. It just don't seem right to me in my mind. But unless somebody can convince me otherwise, Tim Hool, I don't know if you can convince me otherwise. I'm not asking you to, but I don't know. It just doesn't compute to me. If we're going to let a liquor store go in there and there's not going to be, liquor store, but we're not going to have a conditional use permit. What if somebody doesn't like liquor? I don't know, maybe I'm not making a good.
These are about policy choices. And so there isn't a clear do 1 + 1 and it will always equal 2.
Right.
I could line up 100 people and get 89 different opinions about any particular project. And so you're put in the position to listen to all of that and to make a decision about what you're going to do. And what you decide is what we're all going to do. And so I think you're struggling with the policy choice of how easy or how difficult should it be to construct a commercial storage unit along 371 or elsewhere in the county. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that question. I think there's your judgment. You were elected to apply that judgment, so you apply it. Whatever the majority says, that's what we're going to go do.
Well, my opinion is, if you look at this chart, most of the things that we're looking at require a conditional use. the two that are in yellow are the only storage buildings areas in the entire county that doesn't require conditional use. I can't see any reason not to require them to have the same standards as the rest of the county.
Madam Chair, if I might, I would just weigh in to say, for clarification, we're not denying a permit. All we're saying is that we want additional input. Am I correct in saying that?
Just a different.
And that through that process, we might have other things identified that we didn't even think about that might be of concern that would be addressed under the conditions that would be applied to that permit. That's what we're really saying here. I don't think it's out of line to ask some of these developments, and in this case, storage buildings, to go through that process. I don't think that's a hardship on them myself.
Madam Chair, if I can, it's not perfect, like Tim had said. Some developments, it might seem overkill. So if this development, they just wanted one shed and they have to go through a conditional use permit, that might be a little bit of a sledgehammer approach. However, we are seeing the majority of storage buildings now seem like the new model is to build them and sell them. You know, build and sell them. Sure, there's still, I call them the mini storage, where, you know, you get a garage door in a big, long building and you rent it for, you know, $80 a month. But all this is really doing is giving us a little bit more of a tool to ask the questions and have the planning commission, if there's something unique with that specific property, put a different type of condition to maybe address some concerns. But it's still a commercial use. It still is an allowed use, just going to have a little more scrutiny to it. But it's not perfect by any means either. It is going to be more difficult, and it's going to take time because we've got to get them through the public hearing process.
So, Madam Chair, if I can ask another question. So if somebody comes in, might come in with an application, excuse me, I'm not necessarily denied, but if it's somewhere and there's some houses on this side, what the county, you're saying, is trying to do is say, we need some screening there, where right now we can't, when they do that application, we can't require that?
We can try to work with them in some situations, you know, but when it's a conditional use permit, we can require and hold them to those standards. You know, when it's allowed use and they meet the setbacks and you know, there's a lot less that we can, I don't want to say force, you know, but really work with them to develop a plan that meets their needs and the surrounding neighbors.
Can either one of you, Madam Chair, can either one of you just kind of run through some, off the top of your head, some conditions? One thing I think about is screening, obviously.
Lighting. Lighting's a big one.
Hours of operation.
Hours of operation for a business. Sometimes we might limit it to, you know, number of employees. You can't have, you know, you can maybe a maximum of 10 employees if you have a business. You know, you might want to, they might say, we think that, you know, the setback on this property line, we need you, instead of being 10 feet, we want you to move 20 feet more to the west and put more screening there because of the intensification of the use on that side of the property. And so I think it's important to remember that a conditional use, I mean, you know, I think there's always a little bit of misunderstanding about a CUP at the same time, and that, you know, CUPs are pretty, frankly, not easy to deny, like outright say that's not allowed, because you have to prove that there weren't conditions you could put in place that would mitigate the concerns of that permit. And so it's just a matter of putting forth those reasonable conditions that would help to mitigate any potential impacts either to the neighborhood, to the environment, you know, to possibly, you know, to a public road setting, all those sorts of activities. Those are the types of conditions that are put in place on that. And once the CUP is approved, it you know, by case law becomes what's called a property right. It gets recorded with the deed, and then it transfers upon subsequent owners, you know, in perpetuity for that property.
What about, Madam, can I ask another question? So what about if there's, you know, live down by South Long Lake, let's say there's 10 acres and it's, I don't know, rural residential, and somebody says they want to put a storage unit up there, what happens then? Can't do it?
Nope. So if you look over here on, is this working? I can't. Okay. So if you look over where it says storage buildings, and you go
Okay,
R10,
need to see you.
it'd be a conditional use permit in that district.
Conditional already.
Okay.
So the only spot that we're not going to allow a commercial storage building like this, according to ordinances, within the airport district, which makes sense because that's just where we want just the airport.
So what's SS?
Sensitive shoreline.
SS is sensitive shoreline. It's a zoning classification that we have for certain lakes that it's in the ordinance. It just has not been implemented as far as getting actual implementation of the ordinance. So it's something that was put in the ordinance back in 2010. It was based on a study by the DNR where they said these are some parts of certain lakes in the county that are more sensitive than others and should be treated as a natural environment lake for that instead of as a general development lake. And so that just hasn't been put into place yet in the ordinance.
So Madam Chair, on the chart, Chris, then if it's empty, nothing in the box, then it's not allowed?
Correct.
And then AP is what?
Airport.
Okay. But the airport, they're in charge of their own planning and zoning out there. We don't have anything to do with that.
That is correct, but we want to reflect so that someone can come to one place and see what the zoning is for the county.
I see.
Correct. And there is some areas around there that we have to be careful what you build in certain heights because of approaches and that. So there are certain requirements to the ordinance for that.
Madam Chair, could you just run through, like, SD is what?
Oh, I'd be happy to go through that. Yeah. Shoreline district, so that's everything within 1,000 feet of a lake,
Yeah.
300 feet of a river. Ag forested. UG is urban growth, which is those areas that are next to our cities, smaller 1 acre lots next to current cities in the county. RR1 is 1 acre density, and 2.5 acre, 5, 10, and 20 would be the minimum lot sizes. And those are areas outside of our shoreline district. And then you have that's the sensitive shoreline, commercial 1, commercial 2, waterfront commercial, which is commercial right on the lakes for resorts and some of our restaurants. Commercial light industrial, commercial heavy industrial, and the airport district.
Okay.
Madam Chair, would this be an unintended consequence on let's say I'm running a commercial business and I'm in a commercial district running it, and now I want to put some of my equipment now in a storage building on my property. I have to get a CU now if we pass this.
These more are storage buildings intended for use by the public, so not for your, if you
But
own a business.
it doesn't say that in here.
Well, and that's, and I think what you run into in a lot of these ordinances, to be honest, is having to, have policy and interpretation of what these terms mean. I will tell you that I think our land use tables need to be fleshed out more. I think we need to put more detail into that and a little more thought into what these uses are. So, yeah.
I think maybe in our work in the next 2 years of getting these things done, maybe we can divide some of that up a little bit.
That's on our list.
Because I think, if I owned a commercial business somewhere in the county and I thought, gee, I'm running the business, but I need some storage for some equipment, I want to put some, and I want to get a building, I have to come in and get a CU to put a building on my own commercial property. That's not encumbering any scenery or anything else. I have to go in and go through one more step to build a building on my own commercial property that I own, just because my business is growing and I don't want to keep my equipment outside.
We do have definitions, and we do have a definition for this. The definition for a storage building commercial is a building or group of buildings on a property where space is rented, leased, or sold to others for storage of items.
Okay.
So that is how we define a storage building commercial. So they are
Without doing a CU.
right. So for your personal, for your business use, you would not have to get a conditional use. So that'd be a straight permit.
Okay.
Yeah, this only applies to when you're going to build a building that you're going to sell or lease to somebody else to use.
Okay.
I guess I gotta ask one more. I'm almost there. I'm sorry. I'm almost there. I'm working on it. So back to the 10 acres wherever, it's St. Matthias or Long Lake. So somebody comes for a storage unit. They may have a storage unit, but it has to have conditions, or can it be just denied?
A permit can always be denied with findings of fact that would justify why it's not an appropriate use on that certain piece of property because of certain, a situation. But typically, conditional use permits are not denied because the case law has shown that you need to be able to provide in your finding of facts what conditions couldn't have been implemented to mitigate the potential impacts that are being either pointed out by the neighbors or possibly by, what staff is seeing or what the planning commission is seeing. So, conditional use permits are very difficult to deny because you do need to really, there's a lot of thought goes into what are the conditions that would need to be implemented to mitigate any concerns. And there are some conditional use permits that get approved. There's no conditions because there just wasn't a need for them. It was pretty straightforward. It was just a process and there weren't any conditions that were needed to.
So back to the commercial one, could those be denied? I mean, if somebody came in and said, hey, I want to put some storage units in,
Technically, yes.
who would deny that?
It would be, the planning commission has the final authority on approving or denying a conditional use permit. It lies with the planning commission.
They can, but I want to reiterate what Chris has said. It's very rare that you would deny a conditional use permit. It's presumptively permitted. You just think there needs to be some conditions so that the adverse impacts on others are mitigated. A permitted use, you're saying, there are no adverse impacts on others that we're going to be concerned with. Build your own storage place. It's your property. If your neighbors don't like it, okay. You're saying in this particular case, it's still a permitted use, but we're going to require a process to listen to the neighborhood, to add conditions to it that will help it fit in the neighborhood better. It's still presumptively permitted. And if
Okay.
you want to deny something that is permitted under the ordinance, you're going to lose.
I believe so.
And if that's a permitted use, if you deny a CUP, the standard is only about that much higher.
Correct.
And so we need you to understand these are presumptively permitted uses that give us an opportunity to add some conditions to make them more palatable.
Okay, Chris, I've heard so much now that, but any of these that say CU, if you build a building for your own personal use, you don't have to have a conditional use.
Correct.
If you want to build a building or a bunch of buildings to sell, or lease, then you need the conditional use.
Correct.
I think it's reasonable.
Madam Chair, if there's no other questions or concerns, I would make the motion to approve the attached resolution that was recommended by the Planning Commission and Board of Adjustment.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
Motion by Commissioner Barrows, second by Commissioner Lubke. I can't imagine we have any more questions.
Imagine that either.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay. Yeah,
The sheriff left the building.
is the sheriff around?
He was here.
Chad,
guess
do you
not.
want?
Chad, step up there.
Okay, is the
We'll let
county
you off the
attorney
hook.
online?
He is not.
Okay. County administrator.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I was off last week, came back to a senior management team meeting yesterday. We talked about, we're finding ourselves talking an awful lot about market data for wages and what's going on in this employment market, and learned yesterday that there are a couple of our surrounding counties who are paying more than we are, which is abnormal. And so I'm afraid there's a bit of a race going on for some limited talent. We're going to have to pay really close attention to that, unfortunately. We also talked about mental health resources for employees. We had a critical incident a while back where there was a suicide in the jail, and we bring in mental health resources to do critical incident stress debriefings because we know the effect trauma has on people now. And we did not include all of the employees who are in the jail. We just included those that reported through the sheriff's office. You see where those lines on an organizational map sometimes matter when they shouldn't. And that's an example, I think, where it shouldn't matter. And so we talked about how do we bring these kinds of resources to bear for any of our employees who has suffered some kind of a trauma because of the work that we're asking them to do. And then I wanted to highlight, this is the Minnesota Intercounty Association 2023 End of Session Report. I'm not going to read it to you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I summarized it for you, and what I would say is there are a number of areas in which we will be getting additional resources from the state. The most notable ones are county program aid, about $700,000 in additional resources, one-time public safety aid of about $750,000, and community corrections.
Can you guys hear Tim in the back?
Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, because
I'll back up.
You're not right by the microphone, Tim.
And community corrections aid, about 1.5 million in additional resources. In that latter case, I would argue that the state is finally going to pony up and pay us for the level of supervision we've been providing already because of the public safety concerns in the community for not having adequate community supervision. So in my mind, this is the state coming to the party that we've been at for quite a while. We've been talking about evidence-based practices for quite a while. So I think that will help us. There are a number of things on the expense side that are going to consume some of those resources. Market pressures on wages is going to consume some of those resources. Juneteenth is now a state holiday. Is that a big deal? There are 500 employees who we will pay. We were paying them before. So what's the cost? It's not dollars. It's lost productivity. We will pay the same amount of money and get 8 hours fewer productivity from 500 people. That's what it costs us. There are a number of changes to election law changes to allow people to vote, automatic voter registration. There is new language for peace officer duty disabilities that require those who suffer from PTSD in the line of duty in law enforcement or public safety occupations, requires them to go through mental health treatment for a minimum up to 24 weeks, and our obligation is to keep them on the payroll. That is a new obligation. So that is a cost we did not previously incur that will be consumed by some of the additional state resources. It's hard to say how many resources it'll consume because you don't know how many might suffer through an issue of PTSD. So there's a new leave program at the state of Minnesota. We will all be now starting to get a deduction withheld from our paychecks of 0.7%, and we have to determine whether or not that's 0.35 for the employer and 0.35 for the employee. Our obligation under the law is to cover at least half of that. And I think in many cases it'll end up being a 50-50 split, employees covering half, employers covering half. That is an additional cost that all of us will pay. Now, that's not a cost to county government. We're all going to pay for that out of our paychecks, and then you can apply to the state of Minnesota, kind of like unemployment, for a leave that is of longer duration, and then the state will use the resources that are taken from all of us to pay for the leaves for parenting, medical conditions, and those kinds of things. It's a paid leave program. It will take people away from our work. It won't cost us, I don't think, out of pocket, but it will take people away from our work more often than they currently are, which means the existing labor spend produces less. Nibbling, nibbling, nibbling. Normally, I would say that an end of session report is about that long. And so last year I was critical because I didn't think the legislature did anything. This year I am critical because, geez, this is an awful lot in 1 year. Pacing is important, and I don't think the state has mastered that yet. So it creates whipsaws for county government. Last year, we didn't have the resources to do what needed to be done. This year, we have the resources to do what needs to be done, but the list of additional requirements may eat up all of those resources. Is it a net gain or not? That's for you to decide. That's what I have for you today, Madam Chair, members of the board. Happy to answer questions about that or anything related to county government.
Madam Chair, just a comment, I guess, about what Tim first started out with is I personally continue to be worried about losing the talent here. You know, I never made big money all through my whole entire life, but I see the wages that we're paying here, which I've always thought, in the past, I guess I've thought, these are pretty good wages. I've, just like our last discussion, I've come full circle, and I'm realizing that in order for this county board to keep the wheels on, we have to be willing to take a deep dive into whether or not we're paying our people adequately, because if people continue to peel them off here, the place out in Staples that I don't particularly like because they've stole 2 finance directors away from us, which still is stuck right here. So I think at some time, whether it's budget or personnel or something, I think we collectively need to have a conversation about this and do a deep dive on making sure that because if we have Morrison, Aiken, and Cass, which are all smaller counties, and if they're paying more and our people are just leaving and going over there, then we're not doing, something's wrong, you know? And I guess I hate to put you on the spot, but I'm going to ask you to come forward, because in our last personnel committee meeting, it's my understanding one of your mechanics left, and I know to try to find a mechanic now is almost impossible. You have to steal them away from somebody else. And I don't know if we can pay enough to steal somebody away. So have you any prospects, Tim? I mean, because it's a worrisome deal. I know it took us a long time to find somebody, and then we had to do some wage adjustments back then. And so any update on that, Tim? If you want.
We did have the newest gentleman go back to government agency. He came to us from a government agency and had an opportunity to go back. And we have had the position open, and we've had some success getting some applicants. I haven't looked at them personally. I'm not qualified to tell if a mechanic is a good one or not. And I think it closes pretty soon. And I think we have 4 or 5 to take a look at. It's a really tough market. It's one of those parts of the, I don't know, private sector that's really growing, high demand. If you try to get your car in for a oil change, you feel that too. I mean, it's...
no doubt.
I'm confident we will find somebody. I'm also confident the work that we did to look at the wages at the time that he came to us will help us be successful this time. So although he has moved on and we've made some changes, those changes will actually help us this time. And so all that work is not for naught. I mean, it's going to help us. So.
And just to comment, for the people that I represent, in order for us to plow the roads and keep that equipment running and keep the trucks running down the road, this is one of the things that we've got to try to wrestle with, is to make sure we got the adequate amount of people. Because I know if those roads weren't plowed or if the roads aren't fixed, we're going to get the calls. And I don't know, people just are not taking excuses very well nowadays. People have become very demanding, which I understand. They're paying taxes. But anyway, more or less, Madam Chair, just a comment. I think sometime the board has to take a deep dive on this, and we need to take another look at this if we're going to keep the wheels on, and if we're going to do, well, what do you call it, Tim? I can't think of the word on land use ordinance of planned unit development. Is that?
Yeah, that's right.
If we're going to do that, and people come in and they're mad about something going in here, if we're going to do that, we got to have the staff and the good qualified staff to do that. Otherwise, I think people are not going to be happy. So anyway, that's just a comment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I appreciate the comments that Commissioner Coring has made, and I look forward to that discussion. And with that, I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Barrows, second by Commissioner Goring. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.